In our last section on deformers, we'll just go into a little bit more detail and add a few points that might be important about working with deformers. Okay, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about the wave deformer. And to do that, I'll just grab my surface here. I have one right here. And now, the wave deformer, like the lattice deformer or the volume deform, is a control object that you can just pull in here. And if you have an object selected, it automatically gets laid on the object. But because it's a control object, we can actually apply this to more than one object at the same time. So if I now play this back, we have a wave on the actual grid. But if I go into the grid, you'll see that there's a wave operator inside the animation part of the stack. So it automatically is applied as an animation. Now the other part of it is that I also then have the wave itself, so that I can modify both the wave and the operator itself on the grid with various different effect. So it's important to know that if you have like a group of objects and apply a wave to it, every object will have their own operator, as well as then the wave globally across all of them. Okay, so the wave operator itself has several properties. First of all, of course, the type. Is it going to be maybe like a circular wave or a planar wave? Now, again, basically the widget defines it. So if I scale the widget to be complete size of the grid, you'll get it completely across the whole thing. Or a spherical, which basically works from the center outwards. So if I, for example, put it down a little bit, you'll see that then you actually get a deformer working up as well. Whereas if it's exactly planar with the grid, it's just going to go outwards, and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of control. It's basically from the center of this outwards in all directions. Now, so the next thing is, let's just go back to circular here, is the displacement direction. Currently it's just moving up, so in the local y direction of every object where it's on. Then we have in the direction, and that's basically from the deformer outwards. So basically you have the widget, and basically from there outwards it's going to displace in that direction. And then we have normal, so along the normals of the object, no matter what direction it's pointing in. Okay, so next we have the periodicity in space and in time. Now basically what that controls is the repeats of this actual wave. How are they going to be handled? Now you see you have this profile, and if you have it in space, basically what it will do is it will just keep repeating this shape again and again and again. If you have it in time, what it will do is it will repeat this amplitude and spread animation over time. So maybe if you've keyed this over 100 frames, then it will repeat it every 100 frames essentially. Okay, so next we have the velocity, so the speed and the acceleration thereof, and the fall off in terms of area where it's going to start petering out. So this is obviously set by default very, very high, so regardless of how far away the objects will still be taken. And then of course we have the profile, which we can modify to suit the wave that we want. So if we want a little bit flatter wave, we can just do that. If we want maybe like a really sharp spike, we can do that as well. So we can just go right in here and modify the profile according to what we want. And it's a pretty good visual feedback, immediately seeing exactly what we want. Okay, so that's pretty much the wave itself. Now, the next thing I wanted to mention is we've been putting these deformers on often as modeling or as animation, but remember, if you're planning on actually animating them, go and make sure that it's in the animation part of your history stack. So if I go in the Explorer and maybe like put a bend operator, and I'm in modeling mode, let's just put like a deform, maybe a bend, or actually let's grab a different object. That'll make it a little bit clearer. So let's just grab a cylinder here and add some detail to it, and let's put that wave on there again. There we go, a wave. So we have the wave bouncing the cylinder up and down. Very good. And then we're going to put like a bend on it. So go to deform and bend this guy, right? And we'll just, I don't know, make it a little bit more bendy. There we go. So now, if I look at my actual history stack, what I have here is I've now put them under the modeling part of the history stack. Now, while that's fine for now, the minute I freeze off my modeling, they'll be, of course, frozen off. So what I can do is I can just drag these up into the sorry, I've dragged it into shape modeling stack, which is of course valid, but maybe not exactly what we intended to do. There we go. So I can drag them into the animation stack so that I can freeze off my modeling stack without changing the animation. So again, remember, are you trying to model with it, or are you trying to animate with it? Now if I look, the other thing about it is that I can actually reorder these. Which deformer should be applied first? And as you see, depending on which one I actually have on top, it's going to apply first one and then the other, which makes a lot of difference in terms of the actual visual result. So remember that you can reorder these in the history stack if you wish to have a different result. Okay, so let's just go out of here. And one other thing that we haven't actually really gone into, but it's very, very important, is that these deformers can actually be used regardless of whether it's on particles or hair or geometry, NURBS or subdivision surfaces or anything really. So that's a very important point. So let's just grab here for example, some particles. And XSI really treats everything like geometry in terms of being able to put the deformers on it, and even a skeleton or bones or something like that. So if we have some particles, it's going a little bit fast for being able to actually show something, so I'm really going to scale down the speed a little bit, and we'll just go in here and give them a little bit, let's close this all down so it's a little bit easier to see. We'll just make them live forever, and just leave it at that. So basically we have some particles coming out of here. So I can go in here, maybe go to the end here, something like that, and apply a lattice box. Okay, so if I now apply a lattice, I have a lattice box on here. I can take my lattice points and move them around, and it will move the particles. And again, if you have it in your history stack, you have the lattice object itself with its own history stack of the modeling, but you also have then in the particles, if I just select my particles here and go into their history stack, you'll have the lattice itself, and in this case of course it's under the modeling, or I could be under the animation if I wanted it to be. But you have the lattice itself, again with its own operator, with its own fall off scaling, and so on and so forth. So remember that especially if you have a control object, you can have multiple objects or geometries or particles connected to the same control object, and each one will have its operator underneath. But now let's take something a little bit more complicated, or interesting at any rate. Let's grab, for example, a sphere. So now we're going to have this sphere right here. That's a good one, right? Okay. And we're just going to plot that right in the middle of this whole nonsense. Okay. And grab these particles. And let's take, for example, a shrink wrap. When I'm talking about, any deformer will work. Any deformer will work, including things like a shrink wrap. So we can have it go along Y parallel to the axis, or even following the vertex normals of this object. There we go. And we can also increase the actual amplitude a little bit. There we go. Have it maybe go along X, so go around the object. In this case, that's sort of what I was intending on doing. And if I actually go in there, one other thing I'd like to do is pull the amplitude down just a little bit. And you can see now the particles are going around it, shrink wrapping around the surface. One thing that I did actually put that under my modeling, but I actually wanted that under animation. So okay, so we just play that off, and you'll see that okay, the particles go up and wander around the surface and then continue on their path. So again, it's just basically using a shrink wrap on there. And now we could maybe add another deformer on top of that, maybe something like a twist. Okay, so we just select them and add a twist. Whoops, sorry, let's go into there, grab my cloud, and do deform twist. There we go. So now we have a twist going all over the place here. And again, the twist, we have a lot of possibilities, and we'll want this in the y-axis, so it's really twisting around the y of the particles. We can increase the angle for 360 degrees, and then again we have our profile. But you'll see what's happening now is they're twisting around, and then they get to here and they really sort of twist around this. So you're getting multiple deformers working on the particles at the same time. And of course I can go in and change my profile if I want, so that it suits a little bit better, or just tweak it just to be exact. Okay. So just to summarize, the deformers are phenomenally powerful, and regardless of whether this is a modeling tool or an animation tool or a rigging tool, you can really combine deformers, especially things like shrink wrap and cage deform, on any part of your geometry, your skeleton, your hair, your particles, to really tweak the effects and get the desired results. So it's really worth exploring a little bit about how they work and interacting with them, and really just playing around